We're running out of clean drinking water.
Natural water cycles are breaking down.
The fact that some countries are now entering what is called a water bankruptcy. Yeah, this is our reality now.
It's crazy how this is going to be a luxury in the next several decades. Crazy work. You want to know what really rubs me the wrong way? AI gets to drink up water for free, whereas we have to pay top dollar for this right here, okay? Kroger brand water, if that. And I'm done pretending like this is not a problem, okay? The world is about to face a drinking water crisis, okay? And we're already in one. And I think that AI is quietly accelerating it. Every time I hear about new AI breakthroughs, faster models, smarter assistants, and just content that you could just generate at a click of a button using AI, what you're not hearing is about it's like the cost of it all. Like, what's the trade-off to all this? Not the energy bills, not the carbon footprint, but the freaking water, guys. AI doesn't run in a cloud. It runs in warehouses filled with machines that overheat nonstop. And the fastest, cheapest way to cool them is with massive amounts of fresh water, right? Not seawater, not recycled runoff water, but clean, drinkable human water, guys, okay? One large data center I heard can burn through millions of gallons per day, which is insane to think about. Like that's not some kind of error. That is a town, that's like a small city's worth of water, so an algorithm can generate ads, faces, videos, and fake conversations. Now, this is not innovation. This is all about extraction. This is literally everything that all this has to do with extraction. They're extracting your water, they're extracting your energy, your resources, all that. And we are trading fine fresh water for just infinite digital noise. And it's so sad to even think about this. Drink of water versus auto-generated images. Water security versus AI-written marketing copies, right? Or human survival versus machine convenience. And the scariest part about all this is that most people have no idea this is happening.
We're running out of clean drinking water. The UN just released a report that says we are entering our global water bankruptcy era. On today's note of existential crisis, there's actually a lot of contributing factors to why we are running out of drinking water. The obvious one that we have the most control over is AI and AI usage, which is not great to say because we don't really have that much control over whether tech billionaires decide to ramp up their AI control. I made a video in 2025. TikTok, of course, restricted it and took it down, but it talked about how in the year of 2025 alone, AI used more water, more clean, fresh water than all of the water bottling companies globally for that year, combined, by the way. The second, of course, is climate change, which, again, we have a lot of control over, but it's the corporations that are really driving the issues of climate change in our communities. In the beginning of 2025, there are multiple scientific organizations that found that the water cycle is changing and being disrupted, and it is due to climate change, which, again, AI is also a factor into. It's just a running circle of things. The most simplistic answer is that over-extraction. We're using up our fresh water more than it is being replenished by the water cycle and the systems in the world, right? So we are using our water from our aquifers, our freshwater lakes and rivers, our only clean water sources that we are, much more than it is being replenished. and we have now entered what is seen as a global bankruptcy era. This is in a time where 2.2 billion people don't have access to clean drinking water, or have very little access to it, and it's only going to get worse from here. I'm only one person, but I'm going to look into ways that I can conserve water and be more cognizant of climate change activities that I might unknowingly be participating in, right? And that's something that I implore everyone who watches this video to do. It might not seem like it makes a difference, but imagine if like 1 billion people eventually make the decision to start conserving water and start being cognizant of the things they're doing every day.
Well, unfortunately, the moment the scientists warned us about is here, we are now in an era of global water bankruptcy, which means a lot of critical freshwater systems are being so overused and are now so degraded that they cannot be restored to their former state. This bankruptcy means that societies have basically long been using freshwater faster than nature can replenish it annually, while simultaneously destroying the long-term reserves stored in ancient aquifers and vital wetlands. So let's get into what this looks like on a global scale. To start, 75% of the global population now lives in water-insecure countries. 75%. Another thing, globally, 2 billion people live on land that is sinking as these vast ancient groundwater stores collapse beneath them. For example, some of these cities include Rafsanjani in Iran, which sinks by 30 centimeters per year, Tulare in California, which is by 28 centimeters per year, Mexico City by 21, Jakarta, Manila, Lagos, and Kabul are also affected. And among one of those visible signs of this water bankruptcy are the 700 sinkholes now peppering the heavily farmed Konya plain in Turkey. And obviously our lakes and our rivers are also suffering. The Colorado River in the US and the Murray-Darling in Australia, for example, often fail to reach the sea. We talked about the Rio Grande/Rio Brave and it drying up in a separate video, but there are obviously more. Half the world's large lakes, from Iran's Lake Urmia to America's Salton Sea, have been shrinking since the 1990s as well. And even traditionally damp nations, like the UK, for example, will be affected by this because of our interconnected global system, especially with food, right? The UK relies on a lot of food imports from these water bankrupt regions. So don't think you won't be affected simply because you're not in one of these countries. But to remember, it was like 75% of the population, so you might be and just don't know it yet because you're probably privileged or something. That won't last. And what comes with water scarcity? Well, many things, but one of those things is conflict. Water scarcity-related conflict has risen from just about known 20 in 2010 to more than 400 in 2004. That is quite a spike. And then there are the day zero days where you have seen in places like Sao Paulo, Chania, and Cape Town, which is basically they faced, quote, day zero crises where taps nearly ran dry. And agriculture, your food, where 70% of freshwater withdrawals come from, is at the heart of this crisis. Farmers are trying to grow more food from shrinking, polluted, and unstable water sources, and this is compounded by the destruction of natural water stores. For example, wetlands equal to the entire area of the European Union have been erased in the past 50 years. And then don't forget, the climate crisis worsens everything by disrupting reliable rainfall and melting vital mountain glaciers, compounding this problem. All in all, it's not good and we really got to make some changes fast. But if you've made it this far, the report comes from the UN if you want to go read it yourself, as well as please give me a water emoji so I know you're one of the heroes who makes it to the end.
I just want to come on here to share something that I have yet to see grace the headlines of American, news and whatever. The fact that some countries are now entering what is called a water bankruptcy. Yeah, this is our reality now. Okay, so this is like the third time that I've recorded / have tried to record this. First time, TikTok just completely deleted my draft. Crazy. And then, just in between that is a bunch of other just dumb whatever that can get in the way, just getting in the way. So I'm going to try to sum this up so it's not as long as it was the first time. So basically what this means is that the natural resources that give us the water that we need to, survive have gotten to a point of irreversible damage. Irreversible meaning it cannot be fixed. It cannot go back. And a good example of said resource that, we all know is, are glaciers. Yeah. And another one I just learned about today are called aquifers. It has something to do with the rocks, you know, in the planet and all that stuff. You can look it up. You have a phone. Just go look it up. There's those things, but there's also much more. So, you know, just look it up on your own time. But I feel like the fact that this is being brought up now says a lot, because it's kind of like a warning, you know, like the very last final warning, because like we've had so many. Like, this is not a crisis. A crisis you could come back from. You can't come back from where we're at now. We are past the point. We're at the tipping point, okay? And you know, I'm about to be that girl. The rise of AI. AI uses fresh drinking water, water we can use to eat, you know, make food, grow plants, drink, you know, all types of things to live. Is being used by AI to power these data centers. And just, you know, my point is that the water that we could be using to survive, you know, to sustain human life, is being used in such an unnecessary way. And it is being sucked up faster than ever. Okay, if we didn't have AI, we probably wouldn't be at this point right now. We probably wouldn't be. Probably be another, you know, century down the line. However, because people just can't stop making AI slop and you know, brain rot bullshit, here we are. Here we are. And after watching what I recorded back, because I'm like editing, I realized I didn't mention the fact that it is not only AI that is causing this. There are other things that are happening in the world that are causing this to happen. However, my point is that AI is, again, an unnecessary part of what is causing this. Some of the other things that are causing this are just kind of like things that, you know, we kind of just do because they're a part of life and we kind of like need them. For example, like farming and like, you know, the production of certain things. But we don't need AI. And, you know, it sucks to say, but people really just don't care until it's like way too late. People aren't gonna like give a damn until they're literally charging us like monthly fucking subscriptions for water or something, like fresh water in your house or whatever. Like, they just, people will not care until that point, and it really sucks. Anyways, I think I've said enough. Before this turns to more of a yacht fest, I'm just gonna like put a couple pictures of the websites that I read. They're international websites, so y'all can read up on them and understand what's going on. But yeah, I just wanted to like get this across, because, you know, people just got to know what's going on. Like, just stand for something, and just don't pretend that everything's okay, because it's not. Call it fear mongering, but that's what it needs to be at this point, because people are not realizing what's going on. Shit is not sweet, bro. We are actually fucking cooked. Yeah.
AI is drinking up all of our fresh water, and everything on our phones are starting to use AI without us even consenting to it. I recently was on Google on my phone. Like, you know how it's your main browser when you buy an iPhone? If you're on Safari, Google is going to be your main browser. And I was realizing that every time I searched anything, AI was giving me an answer before I even could look for the answer myself. And people would say, like, why don't you just Google it, like, get off of ChatGPT? But Google is also using AI through Gemini. And so I switched it in my settings. I don't know if you can do that, but you can go to your Safari settings on your iPhone and switch your search engine if you want. And I switched it to Bing, which I did not know is owned by Microsoft, because Bing also uses AI when you search. So then I switched it to Yahoo. But AI is drinking up all of our fresh water. Like, only 3% of water on Earth is drinkable, and AI is using it all to cool these massive computers. And I don't want to be responsible for not having water to drink. Like, I've used AI before. Like, I'm not saying I haven't used it, but I'm making the decision now to not use it everywhere that I can, like, without it being shoved literally down my throat. Like, if I can switch from Google to Yahoo, I will. And I'm not gonna just use AI anymore. Like, it doesn't make any sense if we're not gonna have any drinkable water.
I was a little like damn.
Yeah.
The whole time while I was there, I only wanted to see him be it in these.
Greenland has 10% of the world's freshwater resources, and Canada has an additional 20. And the UN today declared that the global freshwater bankruptcy era has begun, where we've run out. So today we're going to talk about the water wars on my series, Actually What's Happening, where we get away from breaking news and we talk about big global trends and topics. I'm not saying that like the global water shortage is the main thing that's like impacting all of geopolitics right now, but I'm not saying that. And today the UN did release a report that said we're in global bankruptcy, and they're like saying basically like we've been saying there was a water shortage, and like that's a thing where we're pulling out more than we should, and we should probably be careful about that and watch that. And then later they were like, well, we're having a lot of water crises, which is like a one-time major event from a drought or whatever, and we should try to get back to normal. And now they're saying there's no going back to normal, we're in trouble, we need to make major changes. And they're like all these crazy things that are in this report that you should read. And they show this chart about water conflict on the rise that I think is like really important for all of us to watch, because look at how that is like going up so fast. And I started thinking like, who has the most freshwater resources in the world now? Probably. And you start looking around and you see that, wow, Canada has 20% of the freshwater resources globally. And 7% of those are renewable freshwater resources, which is a lot for the number of people that live there. And then you look and you see that Greenland has 20% of the freshwater resources globally, if you count glaciers. And you start to wonder, maybe that's why these crazy pictures are being posted and why my country is acting insane, you know, or at least it's a contributing factor, right? And when you start looking at how water impacts everyday life and especially politics places, you start to see things like this headline from The Guardian that shows that in Iran, there's been a major water shortage for several years. And they reached day zero back in December, where like basically like they're out of water, right? And that's happened because of many years of damming and overusing their aquifers and like mismanagement of water that's happened across many regimes. But the impact is that like that water is being used for things like irrigation for crops, and also people have to like drink that water, and it's used for like a lot of purposes, and that increases the prices of a lot of things. And many people are now saying that that is a major contributing factor to the protests that are happening in Iran, because they're running out of clean drinking water. And scientists in South Korea just put out a report that showed that those day zero events that have happened in a few places around the world, South Africa and Mexico City we've talked about recently, could happen in 3/4 of drought-prone areas on Earth before the end of the century. And I think it's important to remember that the Earth is mostly water, right? And like less than 1% of global fresh water, which is like a percent of all the water on Earth, is in like surface waters, which is like lakes and rivers and stuff like that. But we use, now stick with me here, it's a small percentage of all the water on Earth, but those like surface waters, like rivers and lakes and stuff like that, we use that for about 50% of what we use for fresh water around the world now. And so it's really important what happens to rivers and lakes and watershed and stuff like that. And this month I wanted to learn a little bit more about that. So I read this book, Is a River Alive?, which was like very informative. I don't know if it was my favorite book, but he, like this author, goes and visits 3 important rivers around the world and then looks at how countries have like tried to preserve those rivers from different things. And I didn't know that Ecuador is one of the leading countries in the world that has put in place rights around nature and around rivers specifically. And it has helped them produce and preserve river rights in their country. And in November, Ecuador turned down a referendum to rewrite their constitution, which would have taken away some of those rights from nature, basically. It was put forward by their very hot head of state, who I don't agree with politically, but like gotta give game where it's. And I think we can learn a lot from the way that Ecuador has set this up, because what they're allowing for is for nature to be able to like maintain its basic rights. In order to stand up in court and make it so that like preservation sites can continue to be preserved. And that is one big step on the journey, I think, to allowing us to get past this like bankruptcy. And other countries have followed suit. There have been major lawsuits in India and Bolivia and elsewhere that have kind of like helped continue to move this legal framework forward, which should protect these types of places. And the other place that I thought was interesting in this book that's profiled is in Chennai in India, where there are major rivers. And of course, India has like a really solid like historic and cultural connection to rivers. The River Ganges, of course, is very important. And I've been to India a bunch of times to different states, but haven't seen the whole country. But I thought I was drawn to like this story that I saw on CNN a couple months ago about a guy who's going through and trying to like restore a bunch of natural rivers and lakes across India. And part of what he's doing now is he's also restoring their ancient stepwell system, which is like a very cool architectural feature that you've seen probably if you've ever been to India. That's kind of like sunken into the ground, and it collects groundwater and rainwater and filters it naturally through the sediment to create like these freshwater basins within urban environments. And I think like that's a really cool way of trying to connect the past to the present and all the way hopefully to the future. And so like while geopolitically I think there's an undercurrent of water coming all the way through to like some of the major diplomatic tensions that we're facing today as a world, I think also at the same time, a lot of regular people are trying to step up and find ways for our world to move forward in a peaceful way, in a way that really honors the traditions of where we are. And, this river book was a recommendation from somebody in my comments, so please let me know if you see anything else that I should be checking out.
Someday I'll wake and rub my eyes, and in that land beyond the skies, you'll find